The forest moon of Kepler 4 Fortescue had known only one master for 3,000 years. Deep in the crystal caves beneath the purple canopy, the Vorthok stirred from its afternoon rest. 12 feet of pure muscle and bone shifted against the cave walls. 6 razor-sharp limbs stretched as the creature prepared for its evening hunt. The Vorthok was death-given form. Its body resembled a massive serpent, but with 6 powerful legs that could tear through stone. Crystal scales covered its hide, each one sharp enough to cut flesh, but its most dangerous weapon was not visible. The creature possessed a mind that could reach into other beings and taste their deepest fears. For 30 centuries, no creature on this moon had challenged the Vorthok. Every animal, from the smallest tree crawler to the largest ground shaker, knew to flee when they sensed its presence. The ecosystem had shaped itself around this single truth: the Vorthok was the apex predator, and everything else was food. The creature emerged from its cave as the twin suns began to set. Its psychic senses spread across the forest like invisible fingers. Fear signatures appeared in its mind like bright flames. A herd of 6-legged deer grazed near the crystal stream. Their fear tasted sweet and familiar, perfect for tonight's meal. The Vorthok moved through the forest without sound. Its crystalline scales shifted color to match the purple bark of the ancient trees. Smaller creatures felt its approach and scattered. Birds took flight without knowing why. Underground dwellers burrowed deeper into the earth. The forest held its breath. High above the moon, the Terran research vessel New Sol orbited in peaceful silence. Inside the ship, Hyan-Woo Park finished checking his equipment for the 3rd time. The young xenobiologist had waited 2 years. For this mission, today he would finally set foot on an unexplored world. "Shuttle prep complete," announced So-Min Lee from the pilot seat. Her fingers danced across the control panel with practiced ease. "We should reach the surface in 20 minutes." Hyan-Woo nodded and secured his sample containers. He had studied the preliminary scans for months. The moon showed signs of a complex ecosystem with at least 40 different large species. His job was to catalog the plant life and identify any potential threats to future colonization efforts. "Remember the safety protocols," So-Min said as she began the descent sequence. "We stay together at all times. No samples from unknown species without full environmental suits. And we return to the shuttle at the first sign of dangerous wildlife." "Understood," Han-Woo replied, though part of him felt the protocols were unnecessary. He had worked on a dozen worlds and never encountered anything his scientific training could not handle. Fear was a luxury he had never possessed. Hyan-Woo had been born with a rare genetic condition called congenital insensitivity to fear. His brain simply could not produce the chemical reactions that created terror or panic. Doctors had explained it to him many times, but the concept remained abstract. He understood fear the way a blind person understands color. Through description rather than experience, the shuttle entered the moon's atmosphere with a gentle shake. Through the viewports, Hyan-Woo watched purple forests stretch to the horizon. Crystal formations jutted from the landscape like frozen lightning. 2 suns painted the sky in shades of orange and red. "Beginning final approach," So-Min announced. "Landing zone looks clear. Just trees and some rocky outcroppings." That was when the engine exploded. The shuttle spun out of control as flames erupted from the rear section. Warning alarms screamed through the cabin. So-Min fought with the controls as they plummeted toward the forest canopy. "Brace for impact," she shouted over the noise. Hyan-Woo calmly secured his equipment and checked his safety harness. While So-Min's face showed pure terror, his remained completely neutral. The approaching crash was simply another variable to consider and adapt to. The shuttle hit the treetops with tremendous force. Metal tore against crystal bark as they crashed through multiple levels of the forest. The world became a spinning blur of purple and silver. Then everything went black dot. Hyan-Woo woke to the sound of crackling flames. The shuttle had split in half during the crash. He hung upside down in his safety harness, completely unharmed except for a small cut on his forehead. Around him, the rear section of the shuttle burned slowly in the alien atmosphere. He released his harness and dropped to what had been the ceiling. His equipment lay scattered but mostly intact. Through the torn hull, he could see purple trees swaying in a gentle breeze. The crash site appeared stable, though smoke rose from several small fires. "So-min," he called out, moving toward the pilot section. He found her unconscious but breathing. A large piece of metal had pinned her left leg, and blood seeped from a head wound. Hyun-woo carefully checked her pulse and breathing. Stable, but she needed medical attention soon. Working methodically, he cleared debris from around So-min and managed to free her leg. The limb was definitely broken, but the bleeding was minor. He made a temporary splint using pieces of the shuttle's interior and moved her to a safer location, away from the fires. With So-min stable, Hyun-woo activated the emergency beacon and began exploring their situation. The shuttle's emergency supplies had survived the crash. They had water for a week, food for 5 days, and a basic medical kit. The beacon would guide rescue teams to their location, but help could take several days to arrive. As evening approached, Hyun-woo ventured outside the wreckage to gather information about their environment. The forest around the crash site was unlike anything in the databases. Trees grew in spiral patterns, their purple bark embedded with small crystals that glowed softly in the fading light. The air smelled of ozone and something sweet he could not identify. He began taking readings with his portable scanner. The atmosphere was breathable, though richer in oxygen than Earth normal. Gravity was slightly lighter. Temperature was mild and stable. From a survival standpoint, they had landed in ideal conditions. What Hyun-woo did not notice was the absolute silence around the crash site. No bird calls echoed through the trees. No small creatures rustled in the undergrowth. Even the insects had fled. The forest held its breath in the presence of something new and unknown. Deep in its crystal cave, the Vorthok raised its massive head. Its psychic senses had detected the crash, but something was wrong. The new presence on its moon did not taste like fear. It did not taste like anything the ancient predator had ever encountered. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Vorthok felt something it had forgotten. Curiosity mixed with the faintest touch of uncertainty. The apex predator began moving toward the crash site. Drawn by the mystery of a mind it could not read, the food chain was about to change forever. So-min woke to the sound of crackling wood. Her head pounded like a drum, and her left leg felt like it was on fire. She tried to sit up, but pain shot through her body. The world spun for a moment before her vision cleared. She was inside the wreckage of their shuttle, lying on a makeshift bed of seat cushions. Her leg was wrapped in white medical bandages and secured with a metal splint. Someone had cleaned the blood from her face and bandaged her head wound. "Hyun-woo," she called out weakly. "I am here," came his calm voice from outside the shuttle. "How do you feel?" So-min looked around the crash site. 3 days had passed since the accident, though she remembered nothing after the impact. When Woo had been busy during her unconsciousness, he had cleared away most of the dangerous debris and organized their supplies into neat piles. A small fire burned in a circle of stones, with some kind of purple fruit roasting over the flames. "My leg is broken," she said, as Hyun-woo entered the shuttle carrying his scanner. "Yes, but it is a clean break. The bone will heal properly if you rest," he replied, checking the readings on his device. "I have been exploring the area. This forest has many interesting species." So-min stared at him in disbelief. While she had been unconscious and injured, he had been treating their survival situation like a research expedition. His clothes were clean and his equipment was organized. He showed no signs of stress or worry. "Hyun-woo, we crashed on an alien planet. We could die here," she said, trying to make him understand the seriousness of their situation. "The rescue beacon is working. Captain Tae-hyun will find us within a few days," he answered matter-of-factly. "Until then, we have adequate food and water. The local wildlife appears harmless." So-min watched him continue his work with growing amazement. She had known Hyun-woo for 2 years, but had never seen his condition in such a dangerous setting. While her heart raced with worry about their survival, his remained perfectly steady. He faced their situation like a simple problem to be solved. "What have you discovered about the local animals?" she asked, trying to distract herself from the pain in her leg. Hyun-woo pulled out his notebook and flipped through several pages of neat handwriting. "I have observed 17 different species so far. Most are herbivores that resemble earth animals, but with 6 limbs instead of 4. They seem very nervous and run away when I approach." "That is probably smart," So-min said. "We should be careful around unknown wildlife, I do not think they fear us. Haiyan-Wu replied thoughtfully. They run from everything, even each other. This ecosystem appears to be controlled by a large predator that I have not yet seen. As if summoned by his words, a deep, rumbling sound echoed through the forest. Both humans froze as the sound grew closer. Somin felt terror grip her heart as something massive moved through the trees nearby. Every instinct told her to hide or run, but her broken leg trapped her in place. Hyun-Hu, however, showed no fear at all. He picked up his scanner and moved toward the sound with scientific curiosity. Fascinating. The biosignature is unlike anything in our databases. Get back. Here, Somin whispered urgently. Do not go toward the dangerous animal. But Haiyan-Wu was already moving through the purple trees, following the sounds of the approaching creature. His scanner beeped softly as it detected a large life form moving in their direction. Instead of running away, he found a good observation point behind a crystal formation and waited calmly. The Vorthok emerged from the deeper forest like a living nightmare. 12 feet of crystalline death moved between the trees with impossible silence. Its 6 powerful limbs carried it forward with predatory grace, while its serpentine body flowed like liquid metal. Each scale caught the fading sunlight and reflected it in brilliant flashes. Haiyan-Wu watched the creature with pure scientific fascination. He noted its movement patterns, the way its scales changed color to match the surroundings, and the strange way other animals fled before it appeared. His scanner recorded everything as he observed the apex predator in its natural habitat. Vorthok stopped suddenly. Its massive head turned toward Haiyan-Wu's hiding place with supernatural awareness. For the first time in its long existence, the creature had encountered a mind it could not read. Where it expected to find the familiar taste of terror, it found only calm observation and scientific curiosity. The ancient predator moved closer to investigate this impossible being. Its psychic senses probed deeper, searching for the fear that should exist in any living creature. But Haiyan-Wu's mind remained a blank space in its mental landscape. No panic, no terror, no desperate desire to flee or hide. Haiyan-Wu stepped out from behind the crystal formation and stood in full view of the Vorthok. He raised his scanner and began taking detailed readings of the creature. The device beeped and hummed as it analyzed the predator's biology, completely unaware that he was supposed to be running for his life. The Vorthok tilted its head in confusion. In 3,000 years of absolute dominance, no creature had ever stood calmly in its presence. Prey animals always ran or froze in terror. Even other predators showed fear when faced with its superior strength and psychic abilities. But this small bipedal creature simply stood there taking measurements, as if the Vorthok was nothing more than an interesting scientific specimen. The complete absence of fear was so alien that the great predator did not know how to respond. For several long minutes, human and alien regarded each other in perfect stillness. Haiyan-Wu continued his scans while making notes in his journal. The Vorthok probed with its psychic abilities, trying to understand this impossible mind that showed no fear. Finally, the ancient predator did something it had never done before in its entire existence. It retreated. The Vorthok backed away slowly, never taking its eyes off Haiyan-Wu. Its crystalline scales rippled with uncertainty as it withdrew into the deeper forest. For the first time in 3 millennia, the apex predator had encountered something it could not understand or control. Haiyan-Wu watched the creature disappear into the purple trees, then calmly returned to the crash site to record his observations. He found Somin pale and shaking with terror. "What happened?" she asked urgently. "I heard something huge moving out there." "I observed the local apex predator," Haiyan-Wu replied, settling down to write in his journal. "It appears to be a psychic species that uses fear as a hunting mechanism. Very interesting behavioral patterns." Somin stared at him in amazement, while she had been paralyzed with terror at the sounds of something massive moving through the forest. He had calmly approached and studied the most dangerous creature on the planet. Deep in the forest, other animals began to sense a change in their world. The Vorthok's retreat had not gone unnoticed. Small predators that had hidden in fear for generations began to stir with new boldness. Herbivores ventured into territories they had never dared to explore. The food chain that had remained stable for 3,000 years was beginning to crack. And it had all started with one human who could not feel fear. The ecosystem was about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous thing in any environment is something that simply does not understand it should be afraid. Captain Tae-hyun Kim stood on the bridge of the rescue ship Busan, rising and studied the swirling clouds below. The forest moon's atmosphere crackled with electrical storms that made landing impossible. His crew had been trying to reach the crash site for 6 hours, but the weather would not cooperate. "How long until the storms clear?" he asked his navigator. "At least 12 more hours, sir," came the reply. "The electrical activity is too dangerous for shuttle operations." Tae-hyun frowned as he watched lightning dance through the purple clouds. Somewhere below, his research team was stranded and possibly injured. The emergency beacon told him they were alive, but it could not tell him their condition or how long they could survive. On the surface, Hyun-woo had no idea rescue was so close. He spent his 4th day on the moon, exploring the area around the crash site with scientific enthusiasm. His scanner had detected dozens of new species, and he carefully documented each discovery in his journal. The forest was changing in ways he found fascinating but did not fully understand. Animals that his readings suggested should never interact were now sharing the same territories. Herbivores grazed in areas that seemed far too dangerous. Smaller predators moved through regions that should have been controlled by larger hunters. "The ecosystem dynamics are very unusual," he told Soman as he returned from his morning exploration. "The species distribution patterns do not match any known models." Soman watched him organize his samples with growing concern. Her broken leg kept her trapped near the shuttle, but even from her limited position, she could sense something was wrong with the forest. The sounds were different. Animal calls came from unexpected directions. The very air seemed to vibrate. With tension, "Maybe we should stay closer to the crash site," she suggested. "This place feels dangerous." Hyun-woo looked up from his scanner readings with genuine confusion. "I have detected no immediate threats. The local fauna appears more active than usual, but that could be normal behavior for this time of year." What he could not understand was that his very presence was causing the changes he observed. Every day he spent moving fearlessly through the forest sent ripples through the established order. The Vortex retreat had been noticed by every creature on the moon, and they were responding in ways that had not happened for thousands of years. The great predator itself had spent 3 days trying to understand what had happened during their encounter. It returned repeatedly to the area around the crash site, always staying hidden among the crystal trees. Each time it observed the strange human, its confusion grew deeper. The Vorthok could sense every other mind on the moon. Fear tasted like copper and electricity. Anger burned like fire. Even the simple thoughts of herbivores carried traces of constant worry about survival. But this human's mind remained completely unreadable, like a void in the psychic landscape. On the 5th day, the Vorthok's confusion turned to obsession. It began following Hyun-woo's movements throughout the forest, always staying just out of sight. The human continued his calm exploration, taking samples and making notes as if he owned the entire moon. This behavior was so impossible that other predators began to take notice. A pack of crystal wolves observed Hyun-woo walking directly through their hunting grounds. The human showed no awareness of their presence, and certainly no fear of their razor-sharp claws. The wolves had never encountered prey that did not run, and they did not know how to respond. A massive ground cat watched from its perch in the crystal trees as Hyun-woo calmly examined some interesting plant samples directly below. The cat could have killed him with a single leap, but something about the human's complete lack of fear made the predator hesitate. In the natural world, fearlessness usually meant either great strength or great danger. Even the herbivores began to change their behavior. A herd of 6-legged deer that had hidden in the deep forest for generations started venturing into open areas. If this strange new creature could walk anywhere without fear, perhaps the old territorial boundaries no longer applied. Hyun-woo remained completely unaware of the disruption he was causing. His scientific training had taught him to observe without interfering, but his very existence was interference on a level he could not comprehend. He was rewriting 3,000 years of evolutionary behavior simply by being himself. On the 6th day, the changes accelerated. The crystal wolves abandoned their traditional hunting grounds and moved into territory that had belonged to the ground cats for centuries. The ground cats responded by claiming areas that had been neutral ground since the Vorthok first established its dominance. Smaller predators that had lived their entire lives in fear began testing boundaries that had never been tested before. Tree hunters started attacking prey in open ground. Underground dwellers emerged during daylight hours. Scavengers began acting like active predators. The Vorthok watched this chaos with growing alarm. Its psychic senses detected the emotional turmoil spreading through every level of the ecosystem. Fear, confusion, anger, and excitement swirled together in a storm of mental energy that had never existed before. For the first time in its long existence, the ancient predator felt something that might have been worry. The carefully balanced system it had maintained through absolute dominance was falling apart because of one impossible creature that simply could not be intimidated. Hyun-Wu continued his explorations, noting the increased animal activity, but attributing it to seasonal changes or mating behaviors. He had identified over 30 new species and collected samples of 40 different plants. His research was proceeding better than any expedition in his career. "The biodiversity here is remarkable," he told Somin during one of his evening reports. "I have documented interaction patterns that challenge several fundamental theories about predator-prey relationships." Somin listened to his enthusiastic descriptions while fighting down her own growing anxiety. Even trapped by her injury, she could sense the wrongness spreading through the forest. Animal sounds echoed from every direction at all hours. The very trees seemed to vibrate with tension. "Something is happening out there," she said quietly. "The animals are not acting normally." "You are correct," Hyun-Woo agreed cheerfully. "The behavioral patterns are fascinating. It appears that some unknown factor is disrupting the established territorial boundaries. I hope to identify the cause before rescue arrives." Above them, Captain Tae-hyun finally received clearance for landing operations. The storms had passed, and his shuttle pilots were preparing for immediate departure. Dr. Ji-won Park, the ship's psychologist, had been studying the preliminary reports from the surface with growing interest. "Captain," she said as they prepared, "to descend, I think we need to understand what our people have discovered down there. The ecosystem disruption patterns are unlike anything in our databases." Tae-hyun nodded grimly. After 6 days of waiting, he was eager to retrieve his people and learn what had caused such dramatic changes to an apparently stable environment. Deep in its crystal cave, the Vorthok made a decision that would have been impossible just 1 week earlier. If it could not understand this fearless creature through intimidation, perhaps it needed to try a different approach. For the first time in 3,000 years, the apex predator would attempt something it had never needed before: communication. The rescue shuttle broke through the purple clouds at dawn on the 7th day. Captain Tae-hyun watched the forest moon spread out below him like a living map. Even from high altitude, he could see that something was very wrong with the ecosystem. "Look at those movement patterns," said Dr. Ji-won as she studied her scanner readings. "The animal distribution makes no sense. Predator species are overlapping in territories that should be impossible to share." Dr. Min-ho Choi, the mission biologist, leaned over her shoulder to examine the data. "This is remarkable. It looks like the entire food web is restructuring itself. I have never seen anything like this in nature." Below them, the forest writhed with unprecedented activity. Herds of herbivores grazed in areas that had been forbidden for millennia. Predators hunted in packs across territorial boundaries that no longer seemed to exist. The careful balance that the Vorthok had maintained was dissolving into chaos at the crash site. Hyun-Woo continued documenting what he called the most fascinating behavioral study of his career. His journal now contained over 200 pages of observations about species interactions that challenged every theory he had learned. "The territorial disruption is accelerating," he told Somin as he returned from his morning exploration. "I observed 3 different predator species sharing the same hunting ground yesterday. The ecological implications are staggering." Somin had grown increasingly worried as the days passed. The sounds from the forest had become a constant cacophony of animal calls from every direction. Even her limited view from the crash site showed her creatures moving in ways that seemed completely unnatural. "Hyun-Woo, these changes," she said carefully. "The disruption started after we crashed here." He looked up from his notes with genuine interest. "That is an intriguing hypothesis. But how could our presence affect such a large ecosystem? We are just two humans with minimal impact on the environment. What neither of them understood was that Haiyan Wu's impact was not physical but psychological. Every day he spent moving fearlessly through the forest sent messages through the psychic network that connected all life on the moon. The Vorthok's confusion was spreading like ripples through water. The great predator had spent 3 more days trying to understand the impossible human. It followed Haiyan Wu's movements constantly, always staying hidden but never losing sight of the strange creature that defied all natural law. Each observation only deepened its confusion. Other apex predators began to sense the Vorthok's uncertainty. For thousands of years, the crystal serpent's absolute confidence had maintained order throughout the ecosystem. Now that confidence was cracking, and every predator on the moon could feel the change. A pack of shadow bears, massive creatures that had not challenged the Vorthok's authority in living memory, began expanding their territory. Ground cats started hunting during the day instead of only at night. Even the smallest predators grew bolder as they sensed weakness in the established order. The herbivores responded to these changes by abandoning their traditional survival strategies. Herds that had hidden in specific safe zones for generations began exploring areas they had never dared to enter. Flight patterns of aerial species shifted as they tested new territories. Dr. Minho watched this transformation from orbit with growing excitement. "Captain, we are witnessing evolutionary adaptation in real time. This level of behavioral change would normally take thousands of years to develop. What could cause such rapid ecosystem disruption?" "Approach." "I am not certain," Minho replied, studying his readings. "But it appears to center around our crash site. Something down there is acting as a catalyst for these changes." The Vorthok made its decision as the rescue shuttle descended toward the forest. It had spent a week trying to understand the fearless human through observation. Now it would attempt something that no apex predator had ever needed to try before: direct communication. The ancient creature possessed psychic abilities that went far beyond simple fear detection. It could project thoughts and images into other minds when needed, but it had never used these abilities for anything except hunting and territorial control. As Haiyan Wu began his afternoon exploration, the Vorthok positioned itself along his usual path. Instead of hiding, it emerged into full view and stood motionless among the crystal trees. Its massive form caught the sunlight and reflected it in brilliant patterns across the forest. Haiyan Wu spotted the creature immediately and approached with his typical scientific curiosity. He raised his scanner and began taking readings, completely unaware that he was walking directly toward the most dangerous predator on the planet. The Vorthok waited until the human was within 20 feet, then carefully extended its psychic senses toward Haiyan Wu's mind. Instead of probing for fear, it tried to project simple concepts: safety, communication, understanding. For the first time since the crash, Haiyan Wu felt something unusual, a strange tingling sensation in his head, like thoughts that were not quite his own. Images flickered through his mind. The forest from high above, himself walking through the trees, other creatures watching from hidden places. "Fascinating," he said aloud, continuing to scan the Vorthok while the strange mental contact continued. "You are trying to communicate, are you not?" The Vorthok focused harder, projecting more complex images. The forest as it had been for thousands of years, the careful balance of predator and prey. The sudden disruption that had begun with the human's arrival, Haiyan Wu began to understand. "You maintain order in this ecosystem through fear-based control. But I cannot feel fear, so your system does not work on me. My presence is disrupting the entire balance." The great predator projected agreement, along with images of the chaos spreading through the forest. Territorial boundaries dissolving, predators fighting over resources, herbivores wandering into dangerous areas, the careful order of millennia breaking down in a matter of days. "I see," Haiyan Wu said thoughtfully. "You are not evil or malicious. You are an ecosystem regulator. Your role is to maintain stability through controlled predation." The Vorthok projected more images: the delicate balance between all species, the importance of fear in maintaining safe boundaries. The confusion that had resulted from encountering a mind it could not read or influence. As this unprecedented conversation continued, The rescue shuttle landed in a clearing near the crash site. Captain Tahian and his team began their approach through the forest. Unaware that they were about to witness the first successful communication between human and alien apex predator, the ecosystem around them continued its transformation. But now, with a new variable, understanding was beginning to replace confusion. And with understanding came the possibility of a new kind of balance, one that had never existed before in the galaxy. Captain Tahian and his rescue team stopped in amazement as they approached the crash site. Through the crystal trees, they could see Haiyan-Wu standing calmly next to the largest predator any of them had ever encountered. The massive creature remained perfectly still while the human took scanner readings of its crystalline scales. "Is he insane?" whispered Dr. Minho as he watched the impossible scene. "That thing could kill him with one swipe of its claws." Dr. Jiwan studied the interaction through her binoculars with growing fascination. "Look at their body language. Neither one shows signs of aggression or fear. This appears to be some kind of communication." Sungjin Lim, the expedition's linguist, adjusted his recording equipment to capture any sounds from the encounter. What he heard instead was something far more interesting. A low humming resonance that seemed to come from both the human and the alien creature. "They are definitely communicating," he said excitedly, "but not through speech. This appears to be some form of psychic contact." The Vorthok continued, projecting images into Haiyan-Wu's mind, showing him the complex relationships that governed life on the forest moon. Each species had evolved specific behaviors based on their position in the food chain. Fear was not just an emotion, but a critical survival tool that kept the ecosystem stable. Huan-Wu absorbed this information with scientific interest. "Your species evolved as ecosystem managers rather than simple predators. You use psychic intimidation to control population movements and prevent resource conflicts." The great creature projected agreement, along with more complex concepts. For 3,000 years, it had maintained perfect balance through careful application of fear. No species was allowed to overpopulate. No territory was permitted to become overcrowded. The system had worked flawlessly until one impossible creature arrived who could not be controlled. "But humans did not evolve in a fear-based ecosystem," Haiyan-Wu said, beginning to understand the deeper implications. "We developed cooperation and tool use to overcome our physical limitations. Fear is present in our psychology, but it does not control our behavior the way it does with other species." The Vorthok projected images of human behavior that it had observed. Haiyan-Wu walking calmly through dangerous territories. His complete lack of territorial awareness, the way he approached every situation with analytical thinking rather than instinctive reactions. "You want to understand how humans maintain social order without fear-based dominance," Haiyan-Wu realized. "Our species developed different solutions to the same survival problems." The psychic communication continued as both beings shared information about their respective evolutionary paths. The Vorthok learned about human concepts like cooperation, negotiation, and shared decision-making. Haiyan-Wu discovered the elegant complexity of psychic ecosystem management. "We could work together," he suggested, after an hour of mental exchange. "Your instinctual understanding of ecological balance, combined with human analytical abilities, could create new solutions, too." Environmental problems. The Vorthok hesitated, projecting uncertainty. For 30 centuries, it had been the sole authority on the forest moon. Sharing that role with another species was a concept that challenged everything it understood about natural order. But the evidence was clear. The current system was failing because it could not account for human psychology. Either the great predator had to find a way to work with these impossible creatures, or watch its carefully maintained ecosystem collapse into chaos. Captain Tahian decided his team had observed long enough. He approached the clearing with his hands visible and his weapons secured. "Haiyan-Wu, are you all right?" "I am perfectly fine, Captain," Haiyan-Wu replied without turning away from the Vorthok. "I am conducting the most important xenobiological communication study in human history." The Vorthok turned its massive head toward the approaching humans. Its psychic senses immediately detected their fear and tension. These creatures had normal psychological responses, unlike the impossible scientist who felt no terror in its presence. Dr. Juan moved closer with her recording equipment, fascinated by the opportunity to study interspecies communication. How are you able to understand each other? The creature possesses advanced psychic abilities. Haiyan Wu explained, it projects concepts and images directly into my mind. I believe my inability to feel fear allows me to receive these communications more clearly than most beings would. Sung Jin began analyzing the recorded audio patterns. The harmonic resonances suggest a complex communication system. This could revolutionize our understanding of nonverbal interspecies contact. The Vorthok observed the new humans with interest. Their minds tasted familiar, filled with the normal mixture of fear and curiosity that characterized most intelligent species. But they also showed something unusual. Despite their terror, they were trying to understand and communicate rather than simply fleeing. Dr. Minho pointed his scanner at both Haiyan Wu and the Vorthok. The electromagnetic readings suggest some kind of neural synchronization. Their brainwave patterns are actually matching during communication periods. This is unprecedented, Dr. Ji-won said as she documented the interaction. We are witnessing the first recorded case of successful psychic communication between humans and an alien apex predator. The Vorthok made a decision that would change both species forever. Instead of viewing humans as a disruption to be eliminated, it would treat them as potential partners in ecosystem management. The Fearless One had already proven that different approaches could work. Perhaps other humans could learn to function within the psychic network that governed the forest moon. It projected this concept to Haiyan Wu, along with images of possible cooperation. Humans could serve as analytical observers, while the Vorthok provided instinctual ecological wisdom. Together, they might create new models of environmental balance that neither species could achieve alone. You are proposing a true partnership, Haiyan Wu said, with growing excitement. Humans and Vorthok working together to develop advanced ecosystem management techniques. The great creature projected agreement, but also conditions. Humans would need to understand and respect the existing natural order. They could not simply impose their own ideas without considering the complex relationships that had evolved over millennia. Of course, Haiyan Wu agreed. Any collaboration would require careful study and gradual implementation. We would need to learn your methods before attempting any modifications. Captain Taehan watched this conversation with amazement. In less than 2 hours, his xenobiologist had established the foundation for what could become humanity's first true partnership with an alien apex predator. The implications were staggering. If humans could learn to work with psychic ecosystem managers, they might be able to establish sustainable colonies on worlds that would otherwise be too dangerous for settlement. Haiyan Wu, he said carefully, would you be willing to remain here as part of a permanent research mission? The scientist looked up from his communication with the Vorthok, his eyes bright with scientific enthusiasm. Captain, this could be the most important xenobiological research opportunity in human history. Of course I will stay. The Vorthok projected satisfaction at this decision. The impossible human who had disrupted everything would now help create something entirely new. A partnership between species that had never existed before in the known galaxy. The age of human-alien cooperation was about to begin. 6 months after the crash, the forest moon had become the most important research site in human space. The small outpost that Captain Taehan had established around the original crash site now housed 20 scientists from a dozen different specialties. Commander Young Soo Pak stood in the observation tower and watched Haiyan Wu work with his unusual partner in the valley below. The human scientist and the massive Vorthok moved through the forest together, studying the remarkable changes that had transformed the entire ecosystem. Daily report, Commander called Dr. Ji-won from the communication station. The ecosystem stability index has improved by 40% this month. The new partnership model is exceeding all projections. Young-soo nodded as he continued watching the unprecedented cooperation below. The Vorthok used its psychic abilities to gather information from across the forest, while Haiyan Wu provided analytical frameworks for understanding the data. Together, they had solved ecological problems that had existed for centuries. How are the other research teams adapting to the new protocols? He asked. Better than expected, Ji-won replied. Most of our people have learned to work within the psychic ecosystem network. The Vorthok seems to enjoy having multiple human perspectives. On environmental problems, the transformation had not been easy. Early attempts at cooperation had failed when fear-based human responses interfered with the psychic communication system. Only Haiyan Wu could maintain completely clear contact with the great predator. But gradually, other researchers had learned to manage their fear responses enough to receive basic psychic impressions. Dr. Minho had become particularly skilled at interpreting the ecological data that the Vorthok gathered through its network of forest creatures. Seung-Jin had made the most surprising breakthrough. His linguistic skills had helped him develop a hybrid communication system that combined psychic projection with verbal concepts. Now humans could participate in group discussions that included multiple Vorthok and various other species. The ripple effects continue to spread, Dr. Juan reported. We have documented similar ecosystem partnerships developing on 3 other worlds where human colonies have been established. Young-Soo smiled at this news. What had begun as a simple research mission had become a new model for human expansion into the galaxy. Instead of terraforming worlds to suit human needs, they were learning to integrate into existing ecosystems as cooperative partners. In the forest below, Haiyan Wu and the Vorthok were addressing their latest challenge. A group of crystal wolves had begun exhibiting unusual territorial behavior that threatened to destabilize the northern hunting grounds. The Vorthok projected images of the problem into Haiyan Wu's mind. The wolves were not responding normally to psychic territorial boundaries. Their pack structure had changed in ways that did not fit traditional patterns. "Let me analyze the behavioral data," Haiyan Wu said, pulling out his scanner to examine the area where the wolves had been most active. The territorial markers show elevated stress hormones. Something is disrupting their normal social structure. Working together, they discovered that the wolves were responding not to territorial pressure but to changes in their food supply. A plant species that formed a crucial part of their prey's diet had been affected by subtle changes in soil chemistry. The solution is not behavioral modification, but habitat restoration. Haiyan Wu concluded, "We need to address the underlying environmental factors that are causing the territorial disputes." The Vorthok agreed and began coordinating with other forest creatures to implement the necessary changes. Within days, the soil chemistry was restored and the wolves returned to their normal territorial patterns. This type of ecological problem solving had become routine over the past 6 months. The human-Vorthok partnership had proven more effective than either species could have achieved alone. So Min, now fully recovered from her injuries, had become the mission's chief coordinator. Her experience as the only human who had witnessed the initial contact made her invaluable for training new researchers. "The key is understanding that fear is not weakness," she explained to a group of newly arrived scientists. "It is simply information." The Vorthok uses fear as a data source, not as a control mechanism. Once you understand that distinction, communication becomes much easier. The new researchers listened carefully as she described the techniques that had been developed for human participation in psychic ecosystem networks. Some humans, like Haiyan Wu, could achieve complete psychic integration. Others could only receive basic impressions, but everyone could contribute something to the partnership. Dr. Minho had established a research program studying other apex predators throughout the galaxy. His preliminary findings suggested that psychic ecosystem management might be common among advanced predator species. Humans might be able to establish similar partnerships on dozens of worlds. "We are not just colonizing new planets," he reported during the monthly science briefing. "We are joining galactic communities that have existed for millennia." The implications for human expansion are revolutionary. Seung-Jin had made contact with 3 other intelligent species on the forest moon, all of whom had been part of the Vortex ecosystem network for thousands of years. The discovery that the forest contained multiple sentient species had transformed human understanding of planetary intelligence. "Most worlds may have complex networks of cooperating intelligent species," he explained to the research team. "We have been looking for individual civilizations when we should have been seeking ecosystem communities." The success of the Forest-Moon partnership had attracted attention throughout human space. Diplomatic missions were being planned to worlds where similar cooperative arrangements might be possible. The age of human expansion through conquest was ending. Replaced by expansion through integration, Young-Soo received a priority message from Earth Command, requesting a full report on the partnership protocols. The military implications were significant. Worlds that had been considered too dangerous for colonization might become accessible through cooperation rather than terraforming. In the evening, as the twin suns set behind the crystal trees and the Vorthok continued their work together, they had become more than research partners. They were friends. In a way that transcended species boundaries, the great predator projected contentment as it shared the day's discoveries with its human companion. The forest was healthier than it had been in centuries. The new partnership motto had solved ecological problems that had existed since before human civilization began. Hyenwu felt the same satisfaction as he reviewed his notes. His genetic inability to feel fear, once considered a disability, had become humanity's greatest asset in establishing interspecies cooperation. The condition that made him different had made him the perfect ambassador to species that used fear as a communication tool. Tomorrow, we begin work on the Northern Lake ecosystem, he told the Vorthok, as they returned to the research outpost. The aquatic species have requested assistance with some unusual algae patterns. The Vorthok projected agreement and anticipation. Each new challenge was an opportunity to strengthen the partnership between their species. What had begun as confusion and disruption had evolved into the most successful interspecies cooperation in recorded history. As night fell over the forest moon, the sounds of a healthy ecosystem filled the air. Predators and prey existed in careful balance, managed through cooperation rather than domination. And somewhere in that balance, humanity had found its place, not as conquerors of the galaxy, but as partners in its ancient communities. The apex predator still ruled the food chain, but now it shared that rule with a species that had taught it something new. Sometimes the greatest strength was not the ability to create fear, but the ability to overcome it. The forest moon had taught both species that evolution never truly ends. It simply finds new ways to create life, balance, and understanding among the stars.